Hello again, YouTube. My subscribers or baby beans. How are you? Are you doing okay? Are you having a good time? Please tell me in the comments right now. Wow. So, thank you for telling me. I had an okay day right now. I wanted to talk about this whole thing about just not whole thing, but I find it interesting that we had like such a big hung up on Emma Chamberlain's podcast, and then very suddenly we stopped talking about it. And I think that there's a couple of reasons why, and I'd like to yap about those reasons. So, first and foremost, I think that Emma Chamberlain ended up having like a lot of like podcast episodes for Anything Goes that really needed like a person who was well versed in the area. And I think that at the time, her mostly college age viewers of the podcast were like, this is not the move. A very highly touted one is the religion episode of Anything Goes, where it kind of just was like, without being mean, like talking to a high schooler who just discovered what religion was. And like, as much as I love having those conversations, it wasn't like there was a back and forth for it. So there was no opportunity to learn. And you were just like, it was just like sharing the information into the ethers. So obviously, I, in my upset of some of the topics, I was like on Reddit as well. And like that same sentiment of the podcast just being really, really not it was also coupled with, in a very small minority, people being like, I kind of wish that it wasn't about like pseudo psych like philosophical content, and it was just back to the like, I'm talking about experiences that I've had and how to grow from those experiences. But at the same time, I understand that Emma is also probably an incredibly curious person and does want to explain all of the thoughts that she has in her head. Thus, the Anything Goes podcast. So, what I found is that after this big hump of people being like, oh my gosh, Emma, you're making bad podcast decisions, essentially, then it suddenly turned into what is the podcast right now, where before it was Emma was just talking into the ethers, and if you were willing to listen, that's just what happened. Kind of exactly what I'm doing now, really. Um, but the way that it changed is that guests were brought on. So not only was it, oh, Emma is talking literally into the ethers, but for those curiosities that, look, we should all know Emma does have, she brought on a person who was well versed in the field and was willing to listen and ask the questions that maybe, I don't know, most people wouldn't ask, maybe, or not most people wouldn't ask, but ask questions in the nature that she relates to, I guess. So it is really interesting how now it is super duper, like, at least to me, seeing the Reddit barely talks about the podcast half as much anymore. And I can agree. I actually substantially like the podcast more, um, which is funny because this turn of content also happened at the very start of her Spotify contract. So then it turned into, not only did we have to only go on Spotify for the podcast during the time that people weren't liking the podcast, but then the podcast also then had to be like, just had to be about topics that the audience of people who are around her age who would have gone to college wouldn't be having, because they would have these conversations like in class. And that is like another aspect that I think, like, I don't know, I think it's not that Emma needed to go to college. It's just that Emma needed a person who was really well versed in the area to be like, actually, I don't think so. Or, well, this is how it goes if she's wrong. Or to even take insights that Emma has seen in her personal living and be able to extrapolate that to a plethora of knowledge. And so, in some form or another, this then takes the like not knowing aspect of these topics and makes it a lot more palatable to hear and listen to, but also a lot more palatable to like watch and be not like entertained by, due to the idea that you're almost getting checked. Like, you're not only receiving information about Emma's thoughts on these things, but then you're also receiving a double information about how these thoughts are in general perceived in some of these things. And so I feel like a lot of these different topics that has a person there that's being interviewed, they're a lot more interesting than when Emma did it by herself in the first half of, honestly, in the first half of the Spotify contract, I'm guessing. Now, not only then did it open up to other podcasting places, and then also not only did the interviews happen, so there was more than one person on the podcast, but then, really special, the podcast with just Emma felt like the podcast with just Emma at like the beginning of Anything Goes. At least for me, at the beginning of Anything Goes. Or it felt like the type of podcast stuff for when Emma is just talking about life and events and thoughts and opinions on like things. Not trying to teach a thing, but trying to maybe use like a little bit of information to explain a phenomenon in their life, like in her life. Oh my gosh. And so in some form or another, it's really like, I think it's actually really good, the pivot that was taken. And so now you probably don't see half as many people talking about Emma and her podcast Anything Goes, at least not negatively, because I'm going to be honest, I tune in like almost every week to listen to Anything Goes, once when I fall asleep, and then another time when I wake up the next morning and realize that I fell asleep at a point where I don't remember anything that happened past like maybe halfway into the episode, so I go there and watch the rest of it. I feel like Emma has a very calming voice. So that's like, it's really interesting to me, at least, because you'd think that this, just like almost every other version of this sudden dislike, that it would turn into something. And it really didn't. Like, Emma's fine. If anything, Emma's doing another thing that I think also quelled some of this pure hatred and visceral hatred about her podcast by doing a thing that everyone was asking her to do on Reddit, which was to post a video. And like, I'm not saying Emma should post more videos. I mean, I wouldn't mind. They're like the most comforting videos for me to watch. I just watch them over and over. I'm like just a little noodle about it, but it did come also like the first like video after I guess the series of videos that came was exactly during a point at the apex of people being mad at Emma for her podcast being not as good in their eyes. And so then, now that like Emma is posting and Emma's podcast concept has kind of been tweaked a little bit so that it allows for guests to come on, guest speakers, and it allows for her to just have points in time to just talk and yap. It turned into something that we just don't talk about as much. And I really like that full circle almost. So anyhow, that's really all I have to say about that. I kind of circled around a little bit, but we got to the point. And so I am excited to do things here on this ye old YouTube channel. And whatever is actually being in the background is whatever's on the background. Because I kind of like pre-record the like background of me doing like homework or drawing. I'm experimenting. And so I want to hear what you think about this topic, but also I decided that I am like, if you want me to talk about anything else, I kind of want to know what you'd even want me to talk about. Not in like a I'm out of ideas thing, but actually just in a like I'm curious. And so that's about it. You can go to my Ko-Fi to buy my art. And then you could also go to my Instagram and follow my art. And then I guess like go on Tumblr if you want to be scared. I'm just kidding. My art is also there. I post more whips, like work in progress in there. And then subscribe to this channel if you really liked it, or subscribe if you really didn't like it. Hit the like button if you loved this video, or hit the like button because you should, or hit the like button because like that'd be really nice. And I will talk to you later. Bye.